The gunshot echoed through the dusty main street of Silver Creek, Colorado, in 1875, drawing the attention of everyone in the small frontier town, including Josephine Ellis, who quickly ducked behind the general store's wooden column, clutching her purchases to her chest. Not again. The third shootout this month, and it wasn't even the full moon yet when the miners typically came to town with their pockets full and their judgment empty. "Get inside, Miss Ellis," Mr. Peterson, the store owner, called from the doorway. "Ain't safe for a lady." Josephine nodded, her plain brown bonnet slipping slightly as she hurried back inside. At 22, she was well acquainted with the rhythms of Silver Creek, having lived there since her father moved the family west after the war. The shootouts, the cattle drives, the stagecoach arrivals, all part of life's predictable pattern in this corner of the frontier. "Your sister's across the street at the millinery," Mrs. Peterson informed her, peering cautiously through the window. "Sheriff's got things under control now." Josephine set her packages on the counter. "Catherine will be fine. She's likely charming the entire room into forgetting there was even a disturbance." Mrs. Peterson chuckled. "That she would. Your sister certainly has a way about her." The words weren't unkind, but they stung all the same. Catherine Ellis, 2 years Josephine's junior, had been blessed with everything Josephine lacked: golden curls that caught the sunlight, eyes the color of summer skies, and a figure that turned heads from Denver to Dodge City. Next to her radiant younger sister, Josephine was simply plain. Brown hair, brown eyes, unremarkable features. Not ugly, just forgettable, the Ellis girl no one quite remembered. "I should collect her," Josephine said. "Pa will be expecting us home before dark." "Wait until the dust settles, dear. Those cowboys from the Fitzgerald ranch are still out there, and they've been celebrating their cattle sale a bit too enthusiastically." Josephine nodded and settled into a chair by the window. The Fitzgerald ranch hands were indeed a rowdy bunch, though their boss was said to be fair and respected. The Flying F was the largest spread in the county, and Jacob Ellis, her father, often spoke of Cole Fitzgerald with a mix of admiration and wariness. The young rancher had built his empire from nothing after returning from the war, turning a modest inheritance into thousands of acres of prime grazing land. Through the window, Josephine watched as Sheriff Dawson marched a red-faced cowboy toward the jailhouse. The remaining men, wearing the distinctive bandanas of the Flying F, were mounting their horses except for one. He stood apart, tall and commanding, surveying the street with the alertness of a mountain lion. Even from a distance, Josephine could tell this was no ordinary ranch hand. "That's him," Mrs. Peterson whispered, joining her at the window. "Cole Fitzgerald himself. Rare to see him in town these days." Josephine studied him with quiet interest. His dark hat shadowed his face, but she could make out a strong jaw and broad shoulders beneath a well-worn leather vest. Unlike his men, there was no swagger in his stance, just the quiet confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. As if sensing her gaze, he turned toward the general store window. For one startling moment, their eyes met across the distance. Josephine quickly looked away, a flush warming her cheeks at being caught staring. "I should really get Catherine," she murmured, rising from her seat. Mrs. Peterson patted her arm. "It seems safe enough now. Those boys are heading out and Mr. Fitzgerald keeps them in line better than most." Gathering her packages, Josephine stepped out onto the boardwalk. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street as she made her way toward the millinery shop. Just as she reached the halfway point, the doors of the shop burst open and Catherine emerged, surrounded by a cluster of admirers. 2 cowboys from the Flying F ranch immediately straightened at her appearance, their attention completely captured. Catherine's laughter floated across the street, bright and musical. Her new bonnet, adorned with pale blue ribbons that matched her eyes perfectly, sat atop her golden curls like a crown. Next to her, Josephine felt more invisible than ever in her practical brown dress and sensible boots. "Joey," Catherine called, using the childhood nickname that had never quite fit. "Come see what Mrs. Harrison has created for me. It's absolutely divine." Josephine crossed to her sister, nodding politely to the men who reluctantly made way for her. It's lovely, Kath, but we should head home. Pa will be waiting, Catherine pouted prettily. So soon, but I've promised to show these gentlemen the new display at the bookshop. Another time, perhaps, Josephine said firmly, taking her sister's arm. The wagon's loaded and we've a long ride. One of the cowboys stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. Madam, perhaps we could escort you ladies home. These roads ain't always safe for two women alone. Before Josephine could refuse, a deeper voice cut through the conversation. Dawson, porter, the herd's waiting. Mount up. Cole Fitzgerald had approached without Josephine noticing. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall and solid as an oak, with eyes the color of storm clouds. Those eyes swept over Catherine, acknowledging her beauty with the briefest glance before settling on Josephine. Miss Ellis, he said, and Josephine realized with a start that he was addressing her, not her sister. Jacob Ellis's daughters, correct? Yes, sir, she replied, surprised he knew their name. Your father sells fine horses. I purchased 2 from him last spring. His gaze was direct, assessing but not unkind. You're heading back to Elkhorn Valley, Josephine nodded, finding her voice. Yes, Mr. Fitzgerald, we finished our errands in town. The northern trail had a washout from yesterday's rain. Take the Ridge Road instead. He delivered this information matter-of-factly, with no hint of condescension. Thank you for the warning, Josephine said, oddly touched by his practical concern. Catherine, clearly not used to being overlooked, stepped forward with her most dazzling smile. How kind of you to concern yourself with our welfare, Mr. Fitzgerald. Perhaps you'd care to join us for Sunday dinner sometime. Father often speaks of you. Fitzgerald's expression remained unchanged. Your father is a good man. Please give him my regards. His eyes returned to Josephine. Safe journey, Miss Ellis. With a tip of his hat, he turned and walked toward his waiting horse, calling once more for his men to follow. The cowboys reluctantly bid Catherine farewell, casting longing glances over their shoulders as they mounted up. Catherine watched them ride away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Well, I've never been so summarily dismissed. Who does he think he is? The man who signs their paychecks, Josephine replied practically, guiding her sister toward their wagon, and he was perfectly polite. He barely looked at me, Catherine said, the confusion in her voice almost comical. She was so accustomed to being the center of male attention that anything less seemed incomprehensible. Josephine helped her sister into the wagon before climbing up herself and taking the reins. Not every man is susceptible to golden curls and blue eyes, Kath. Nonsense, he's just odd, everyone says so, lives alone in that big house on the Flying F with just his housekeeper and foreman. Doesn't socialize, probably doesn't know how to talk to ladies. As they pulled away from town, Josephine found herself thinking of those storm-gray eyes that had truly looked at her instead of past her to Catherine. It was such a rare occurrence that she wasn't quite sure what to make of it. Did you notice he knew who we were? She asked as they followed his advice, taking the ridge road that wound around the valley. Catherine shrugged. Pa sells horses to half the county, and everyone knows who we are. No, Josephine thought, everyone knows who you are. I'm just the plain one who comes along with you. The Ellis homestead came into view as they crested the final hill, a modest but well-maintained ranch house with a large barn and several corrals where their father's prized horses grazed. Jacob Ellis had built it all from nothing after bringing his daughters west following their mother's death. A skilled horse breeder from Kentucky, he'd found his place in the Colorado Territory, raising quarter horses sought after for their speed and endurance. As they pulled into the yard, their father emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. At 53, Jacob Ellis remained strong and straight-backed, though his dark hair had silvered at the temples and lines had deepened around his eyes. There are my girls, he called. Was beginning to think you'd decided to stay in town. There was a disturbance on Main Street, Josephine explained as she set the brake. And we ran into Mr. Fitzgerald of the Flying F. Their father's eyebrows rose as he helped Catherine down from the wagon. Cole Fitzgerald, that's unusual. Man rarely comes to town except on business. He warned us about the washout on the northern trail, Josephine added, gathering their purchases. Decent of him, Jacob nodded. He's a fair neighbor, keeps to himself mostly, invited him to dinner more than once, but he always declines. Man needs a wife, if you ask me. That spread's too big for a bachelor to manage alone, Catherine laughed, linking her arm through their father's. Perhaps I should set my cap for him, Pa. He's surely the wealthiest man in the county. Jacob patted her hand affectionately. Aim higher, kitten. You could catch yourself an Eastern gentleman with your looks, maybe one of those railroad men who keep coming through. Josephine followed them into the house, listening to her father and sister's easy banter with a familiar ache in her chest. She'd long ago accepted that Catherine was their father's favorite, not through any malice on his part, but simply because her vibrant sister was so much like their mother, whose memory Jacob still cherished. Josephine, practical and steady, was more useful than precious. That evening, as she prepared supper, Josephine found her thoughts returning to Cole Fitzgerald and their brief encounter. There had been something in his direct gaze that had made her feel seen in a way she rarely experienced. Not admired or desired, Catherine cornered the market on those reactions, but acknowledged as a person of substance. It was probably nothing, she told herself as she kneaded bread dough with more force than necessary. Just a man with business on his mind who happened to recognize her as the daughter of a horse trader he respected. Nothing more. Yet as she lay in bed that night, listening to Catherine's soft breathing from the other side of their shared room, Josephine couldn't help wondering what it would be like to be the one noticed first, for once in her life. 3 days later, Josephine was in the vegetable garden behind the house when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. A lone rider was coming up the lane, his broad-shouldered silhouette immediately recognizable even at a distance. She quickly removed her gardening gloves and smoothed her apron, suddenly conscious of the dirt smudges on her cheeks and the wisps of hair that had escaped her practical braid. She watched as Cole Fitzgerald dismounted in the yard, tying his horse to the hitching post before approaching the house. Her father emerged from the barn to greet him, and the two men shook hands with the easy familiarity of neighbors who respected each other's boundaries. Josephine hesitated, unsure whether to make her presence known or continue with her work. The decision was made for her when her father glanced in her direction and waved her over. "Joey, come meet Mr. Fitzgerald properly. I believe you encountered him in town earlier this week." She approached, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fitzgerald." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. "Miss Ellis, I hope you found the Ridge Road satisfactory." "We did, thank you. Your advice was most helpful." Jacob looked between them with interest. "Cole here is looking to add to his stock. Says he needs a horse with more stamina for his foreman's long rides to the north pastures." "I remembered your bay gelding," Fitzgerald said to Jacob. "Thought you might have something similar with a bit more height." "Indeed I do. Come see what I've got in the south paddock." Jacob turned to Josephine. "Joey, would you mind bringing some refreshment out to the corral? I expect Mr. Fitzgerald is parched after his ride." "Of course, Pa." As the men walked toward the horse enclosures, Josephine hurried inside to prepare a pitcher of fresh lemonade. The kitchen was blessedly cool compared to the June heat outside. She worked quickly, slicing lemons and adding just the right amount of sugar to the water. "Who was that?" Catherine appeared in the doorway, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. She'd clearly been napping, her cheeks flushed with sleep. "Mr. Fitzgerald from the Flying F. He's here to look at Pa's horses." Catherine's eyes widened. "Cole Fitzgerald, here." She immediately began fussing with her hair. "Why didn't you wake me?" "I didn't know you wanted to be disturbed for a horse sale," Josephine replied, though she knew perfectly well why her sister was suddenly so alert. "Don't be obtuse, Joey. He's the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties. Catherine rushed to the small mirror hanging by the back door, pinching her cheeks to heighten their color. "How do I look?" Josephine sighed. "Beautiful as always." "I'll take the refreshments out," Catherine offered with suspicious generosity, reaching for the tray Josephine had prepared. "Pa asked me to do it." "Don't be selfish, Joey. You've already met Mr. Fitzgerald. It's only fair I get a turn." Catherine's tone was light, but there was steel beneath it, the unspoken understanding that had existed between them since childhood. The pretty sister got what she wanted. Rather than argue, Josephine handed over the tray. "Fine, I need to finish in the garden anyway." Catherine beamed, quickly checking her reflection once more before heading out the door, her steps measured to appear casual yet graceful. Josephine returned to her vegetable patch, kneeling among the rows of beans and tomatoes. From this position, she had a clear view of the corral where her father was showing Fitzgerald several horses. She watched as Catherine approached, her blue dress a stark contrast to the dusty browns and greens of the ranch. Even from a distance, Josephine could see how her sister's arrival changed the dynamic, her father's proud smile, the straightening of the ranch hands' postures. Only Cole Fitzgerald seemed unmoved. He accepted the lemonade with a polite nod but returned his attention to the bay mare Jacob was showing him. Catherine positioned herself by the fence, laughing at something their father said, tossing her hair in that practiced way that usually had men tripping over themselves. Josephine couldn't hear their conversation, but she could read the scene well enough. Her sister was performing her usual magic, and yet Fitzgerald remained focused on the horses, discussing something with her father in what appeared to be serious tones. Not rude to Catherine, but not captivated either. It was so unusual that Josephine found herself abandoning her gardening to watch more closely. She gathered her basket of vegetables and walked toward the house, taking a path that brought her within earshot of the corral. "She's got excellent bloodlines," her father was saying, "and the temperament to match, steady under pressure but spirited when you need speed." Fitzgerald ran a hand along the mare's flank, his expression thoughtful. "She's well-formed. What about her stamina on long rides?" "Took her on a 3-day trek to Denver myself last fall, outpaced horses half her age." Catherine leaned gracefully against the fence post. "She's lovely, isn't she, Mr. Fitzgerald? Almost the same color as my hair." She touched her golden locks meaningfully. Fitzgerald glanced at her briefly. "I'd say she's more chestnut than gold, Miss Ellis." He turned back to Jacob. "I'd like to see her pace on a longer stretch if you don't mind, of course." Jacob signaled to one of the hands to saddle the mare. Catherine tried again. "Do you attend many of the social gatherings in Silver Creek, Mr. Fitzgerald? I don't recall seeing you at the spring dance." "I don't have much time for socializing, Miss Ellis. The ranch keeps me occupied." "Surely even the busiest rancher needs some recreation," she persisted, her smile dazzling. "The Founders' Day celebration is next month. There will be a picnic and dancing on the town green." Before he could respond, Jacob clapped him on the shoulder. "She's ready for you to try, Cole. Let's see what you think." As the men moved toward the saddled horse, Catherine's smile faltered slightly. She was not accustomed to being so thoroughly overshadowed by a business transaction. Josephine continued toward the house, smiling despite herself. It was refreshing, somehow, to see someone immune to her sister's charms. Not that she blamed men for falling under Catherine's spell. Her beauty was undeniable, and she had a vivacious personality to match. But Cole Fitzgerald's indifference was interesting. Inside the kitchen, Josephine began preparing supper, slicing the freshly picked vegetables and setting water to boil. Through the window, she could see Fitzgerald putting the mare through her paces in the larger paddock, the horse responding beautifully to his commands. He sat tall in the saddle, his posture speaking of years of experience and a natural affinity with horses. Nearly an hour passed before she heard the men returning to the house. Her father's voice carried through the open window. "You'll stay for supper, of course." "We've plenty, and it's a long ride back to your place." There was a pause before Fitzgerald responded. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense. Joey's made enough to feed an army as usual. Besides, we can finalize the details of the sale." Josephine quickly glanced around the kitchen, suddenly concerned about the simple meal she'd prepared. Beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie weren't fancy fare for a man who likely had a proper cook at his ranch house. She was about to add more vegetables to the stew when the back door opened, and her father entered with their guest. "Joey, Mr. Fitzgerald has agreed to join us for supper. I told him nobody makes better apple pie in the territory. Fitzgerald removed his hat, revealing those storm-gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I appreciate the invitation, Miss Ellis. Your father speaks highly of your cooking. It's nothing elaborate, she said, feeling oddly flustered under his direct gaze. Just simple ranch fare. The best kind, he replied with what might have been the ghost of a smile. Catherine swept in behind them, having obviously taken a moment to refresh herself. Her hair was neatly pinned up now, and she'd changed into a prettier dress than the one she'd worn earlier. How wonderful that you're staying, Mr. Fitzgerald, she said, moving to take over setting the table from Josephine. We so rarely have company for dinner. Jacob Ellis took his usual seat at the head of the table. That's because we're too far from town for casual callers. One of the downsides of good grazing land, you need space for it. The isolation has its advantages, Fitzgerald commented, taking the seat Jacob indicated. Fewer distractions. And fewer suitors for my girls, Jacob laughed. Sometimes I think I've done them a disservice, settling so far from society. Catherine placed a hand on her father's shoulder as she set a glass before him. You know I love it here, Pa, though I wouldn't mind a few more dances and socials. You'll have your fill of society soon enough, Jacob said affectionately. Pretty thing like you won't stay hidden on a horse ranch forever. Josephine served the stew in silence, accustomed to these exchanges that implicitly excluded her from the category of daughters likely to be whisked away by eager suitors. She placed a bowl before Fitzgerald last, careful not to meet his eyes. This looks excellent, Miss Ellis, he said quietly, the simple courtesy catching her off guard. Thank you, she replied, taking her own seat across from him. Conversation during the meal centered mostly on horses and ranch business. Jacob and Fitzgerald discussed breeding lines, grazing techniques, and the challenges of the upcoming winter. Catherine made several attempts to steer the conversation toward more social topics, but the men's shared interests proved resilient. Josephine spoke little, but she listened intently. Fitzgerald was clearly knowledgeable about ranching, offering insights that even her experienced father found valuable. There was an understated intelligence to him that she found intriguing, no boasting or posturing, just practical wisdom earned through experience. When she served the apple pie, Catherine made one more determined effort. Mr. Fitzgerald, I've been meaning to ask if you've read any of the new novels from back east. Mrs. Peterson at the general store receives a shipment every month, and I find them so diverting. Fitzgerald considered the question seriously. I read mostly practical manuals and newspapers, Miss Ellis, though I did enjoy Mark Twain's new book last winter. Oh, which one? Josephine asked before she could stop herself, her interest in literature overriding her usual reticence. His eyes met hers with something like approval. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, have you read it? Yes, just last month. I found his depiction of childhood remarkably true, despite the exaggerations for humor's sake. Precisely my thought, he nodded, and for a moment they were connected by this shared appreciation. Catherine looked between them with barely concealed surprise before quickly recovering. I prefer more romantic stories myself. Mrs. Peterson has promised me the latest from Mrs. Southworth next month. The conversation shifted again, but Josephine caught Fitzgerald glancing at her bookshelf in the corner of the room, his expression thoughtful. When supper concluded, he insisted on helping clear the table despite Catherine's protests that it wasn't necessary. My mother raised me to believe that everyone contributes, he said simply, gathering plates with efficient movements. In the kitchen, as Josephine prepared to wash the dishes, she found herself alone with him for a brief moment. He placed the stack of plates carefully on the counter beside her. Thank you for the meal, Miss Ellis. It was far better than what awaits me at home. Surely your housekeeper is a good cook, she said, surprised. Mrs. Holloway does her best, but she lacks your attention to detail. He hesitated, then added, I noticed your bookshelf is well stocked for a frontier home. Josephine smiled despite herself. Books travel well, Mr. Fitzgerald. They're my one indulgence, a worthy one. He seemed about to say more when Catherine entered with the remaining glasses. Joey always has her nose in a book, she said lightly. Pa says she'll ruin her eyes reading by lamplight. Some things are worth the risk, Fitzgerald replied, his gaze lingering on Josephine for a moment before he turned to Catherine. Thank you both for your hospitality. I should be heading back before full dark. Jacob Ellis saw him to his horse, finalizing the sale of the mare and arranging for delivery the following week. Josephine watched from the kitchen window as Fitzgerald mounted up, his tall figure silhouetted against the sunset. Just before riding away, he glanced back at the house, his eyes finding her in the window. He tipped his hat once, the gesture oddly personal, then turned his horse toward home. Well, Catherine said behind her, that was disappointing. I've never met a man so determined not to be charmed. Josephine turned from the window, returning to the dishes. Perhaps he's just focused on his ranch, or perhaps he's simply odd, as everyone says. Catherine picked up a towel to help dry the plates, though I suppose he's handsome enough in a stern sort of way. He seemed perfectly normal to me, Josephine replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. Just serious. Catherine studied her sister with sudden interest. You liked him? I hardly know him, Josephine protested, feeling her cheeks warm. You blushed when he complimented your pie, and you actually spoke about books instead of hiding behind your usual silence. Catherine's tone was teasing but not unkind. It's all right to admit it, Joey. Even plain girls can have admirers. The words stung, despite being delivered without malice. Catherine simply stated what she perceived as fact. Josephine was the plain sister, and any male attention directed her way was noteworthy for its rarity. He was being polite, nothing more, Josephine said firmly, and I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't call me plain quite so often. Catherine looked genuinely surprised. But you always say it yourself. Practical Josephine, sensible Joey, those are your words. There's a difference between acknowledging I'm practical and hearing myself described as plain, Josephine replied quietly. One is about what I do, the other about how I look. Catherine's expression softened. I'm sorry, Joey, I didn't think. You know I don't mean it unkindly. I know. Josephine handed her sister a dried plate to put away. Let's finish these dishes, it's getting late. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Catherine braiding her golden hair while Josephine brushed out her simpler brown locks, her sister broached the subject again. You really should speak up more often, Joey. You're quite knowledgeable about all those books you read. Men might find that interesting. Josephine set down her brush. What men? The cowboys who pass through looking at Pa's horses, the miners who come down from the hills once a month. There's the new schoolteacher in town, Catherine suggested. He's a bit older, but he has a good position, or doctor. Miller's son, who's returning from medical school back east next month. I don't need you to find me a husband, Kath. Everyone needs someone, Catherine said, climbing into bed, even Cole Fitzgerald, though he doesn't seem to know it yet. Josephine blew out the lamp, plunging their room into darkness. Good night, Catherine. Good night, and Joey, you're not plain, not really, you're just quieter than your looks, if that makes sense. It didn't entirely, but Josephine appreciated the attempt at kindness. As she drifted towards sleep, her thoughts returned to those storm-gray eyes that had seemed to see past her unremarkable exterior to something worth noticing underneath. It was a novel experience, being truly seen, and she found herself hoping it might happen again. A week passed, filled with the usual ranch chores and routines. Jacob Ellis and one of the hands delivered the mare to the Flying F, returning with payment and word that Fitzgerald was pleased with his purchase. Josephine tried not to feel disappointed that he hadn't come himself, reminding herself that ranchers had little time for social calls during the busy summer season. On Saturday, she accompanied her father and sister to town for supplies. Silver Creek was bustling with its usual weekend activity, miners down from the hills, cowboys from surrounding ranches, and local families conducting their weekly business. While Catherine visited the millinery shop, Josephine headed to the general store with their list of needed items. Morning, Miss Ellis, Mrs. Peterson greeted her warmly. Your usual order today? Yes, please, and we need extra coffee this time. Pa says we're running low. Josephine handed over her list. As Mrs. Peterson gathered the items, Josephine browsed the small shelf of books at the back of the store. There were only a few new titles. Frontier towns didn't receive regular shipments of literature, but she always checked, hopeful for something she hadn't read, looking for anything particular. The deep voice behind her made her turn quickly. Cole Fitzgerald stood there, hat in hand, those gray eyes regarding her with what seemed like genuine interest. "Mr. Fitzgerald," she said, flustered by his unexpected appearance. "I didn't realize you were in town today." "Banking business," he replied. "Your father mentioned you're an avid reader. I thought you might appreciate this." From inside his vest, he withdrew a small, cloth-wrapped package and held it out to her. Josephine took it with surprise, carefully unwrapping the cloth to reveal a book, a new copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. "I noticed you didn't have it on your shelf," he explained. "You mentioned reading it last month, but I thought perhaps it was borrowed." Josephine ran her fingers over the embossed cover, touched beyond words by the thoughtful gesture. "It was from Mrs. Harrison at the millinery shop. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. This is most kind." "Cole," he said quietly. "My friends call me Cole." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that this gift was more than mere politeness. "Thank you." "Cole," she replied, his name feeling strangely intimate on her lips. He nodded, seeming pleased. "I should let you finish your shopping. Will you be in town long?" "We usually head back by mid-afternoon. Catherine has several stops to make first." His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Your sister seems to enjoy town life." "She does. It offers more attention than the ranch. And you, do you prefer town or country?" Josephine considered the question seriously. "I like both for different reasons. Town has books and news from the outside world, but the ranch has space to think and quiet to hear your own thoughts." He studied her face, his expression thoughtful. "An uncommonly balanced view, Miss Ellis." "Josephine," she offered, "or Joey, though I've never been fond of that nickname." "Josephine suits you better," he agreed. "It has dignity." From the front of the store, Mrs. Peterson called that her order was ready. Josephine reluctantly stepped back. "I should go." "Thank you again for the book." "My pleasure." He replaced his hat. "Perhaps we'll cross paths again before you leave town." She gathered her purchases, including the precious book, and headed back into the sunlit street. Her heart was beating oddly fast, and she felt a smile tugging at her lips that seemed impossible to suppress. He had brought her a book, had noticed what was missing from her shelf, and thought to remedy it. Such consideration was entirely new in her experience. Her pleasant thoughts were interrupted by the sight of Catherine, surrounded by her usual cluster of admirers outside the dress shop. As Josephine approached, her sister waved her over excitedly. "Joey, Mr. Hargrove has invited us to join his party for lunch at the hotel. Isn't that wonderful?" Josephine recognized the well-dressed gentleman beside Catherine as one of the railroad surveyors who had been in the area for several weeks. He tipped his hat politely. "Miss Ellis, I'd be honored if you'd join us. Your father too, of course." "That's very kind, Mr. Hargrove, but I need to finish our errands," Josephine replied. "Perhaps another time." Catherine's smile dimmed slightly. "But Joey, we rarely get invitations to dine at the hotel. Surely the errands can wait." Pause, expecting these supplies. "You go ahead and enjoy yourself. I'll meet you at the wagon at 3 o'clock as planned." Catherine clearly wanted to argue, but was too well-mannered to do so in front of her admirer. "If you're certain, Mr. Hargrove, my sister is terribly dedicated to her responsibilities." The gentleman nodded approvingly. "A commendable quality, Miss Ellis. Perhaps another time then." As Catherine departed with her eager escort, Josephine continued down the street toward the feed store where her father would be negotiating prices. She was halfway there when a deep voice called her name. Turning, she saw Cole approaching, leading his horse. "I was hoping to catch you," he said. "I wonder if I might make a suggestion." "Of course." "Have you visited the new lending library Mrs. Whittaker has established at the schoolhouse?" "She's received several crates of books from donors back east." Josephine's eyes widened. "I hadn't heard. Is it open today?" "Until noon. I happened to notice the sign when passing the school." He hesitated, then added, "I'd be happy to walk you there if you'd like." She glanced toward the feed store, knowing her father wouldn't miss her for a while yet. I would like that very much, thank you. They walked side by side down the main street, drawing curious glances from townspeople unaccustomed to seeing the reserved owner of the Flying F in female company. Cole seemed oblivious to the attention, asking Josephine about her favorite authors and listening with genuine interest to her responses. "You've read widely for someone so young," he commented as they approached the schoolhouse. "My mother loved books," Josephine explained. "She brought as many as she could when we moved west, and she taught Catherine and me to read before we were 5. After she died, I found comfort in her books. It was like having a piece of her still with me." Cole's expression softened. "I understand. My father had a similar passion for Shakespeare. I can still recite passages he read to me as a boy." The simple confession, offered without pretense, touched Josephine deeply. There was something about Cole Fitzgerald that invited honesty, perhaps because he offered it so freely himself. The schoolhouse was quiet when they arrived, most children enjoying their Saturday freedom. Mrs. Whittaker, a kindly woman in her 50s who had taught generations of Silver Creek children, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Fitzgerald, Miss Ellis, what a pleasure." "Are you here to see our little library?" "We are," Cole confirmed. "I mentioned it to Miss Ellis, knowing her interest in literature." Mrs. Whittaker beamed. "It's modest but growing. Come, let me show you." In the back room of the schoolhouse, shelves had been erected along one wall, filled with perhaps 100 volumes. To Josephine, who had read and reread her family's small collection countless times, it seemed like a treasure trove. "Donors from Boston and Philadelphia sent most of these," Mrs. Whittaker explained. "We allow borrowing for 2 weeks at a time. Anyone in the county is welcome." Josephine moved along the shelves, fingers trailing reverently over the spines. There were novels she'd heard of but never seen, collections of poetry, histories, and scientific texts. "This is wonderful," she breathed. Cole watched her with a small smile. "I thought you'd appreciate it." "I do, very much." She turned to Mrs. Whittaker. "May I borrow something today?" "Of course, dear. Take your time choosing." As Josephine browsed the shelves, Cole engaged Mrs. Whittaker in conversation about the school's needs for the coming term. Josephine overheard enough to realize he was offering financial support for supplies and building repairs. His generosity was offered matter-of-factly, with no desire for recognition, another quality she found herself admiring. Eventually, she selected a volume of poetry by Emily Dickinson, a writer she'd read about but whose work she hadn't encountered. When she brought it to Mrs. Whittaker to record the loan, Cole was concluding his business. "I'll have the lumber delivered next week then," he was saying, "and please let me know if you need anything else." Mrs. Whittaker patted his arm affectionately. "You're a good man, Cole Fitzgerald, no matter what some gossips say about you being standoffish. I've always said you just needed the right reason to come to town more often." Her eyes twinkled meaningfully as she glanced between him and Josephine. Cole cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically discomfited. "We should let you get to your Saturday, Mrs. Whittaker. Thank you for showing us the library." Outside in the bright sunlight, Josephine clutched her borrowed poetry book and the gifted novel to her chest. "Thank you for telling me about the library. It's a wonderful resource for the community." "I'm glad you found something of interest," he replied, falling into step beside her as they headed back toward the main street. "Your father will be wondering where you are." "Yes, I should find him." She hesitated, then added impulsively, "Would you? That is, would you care to join us for dinner again sometime, as a proper guest, not just because you happen to be there on business?" The invitation surprised him, she could tell, but his response was immediate. "I would like that very much, Josephine. Sunday, perhaps, if you're not otherwise engaged. Sunday would be perfect." He stopped at the corner where they would need to part ways. "Until then." "Until then," she echoed, feeling strangely breathless as he tipped his hat and continued toward the bank. She found her father at the general store, having completed his feed purchases and now selecting tobacco for his pipe. His eyebrows rose when she appeared. "There you are, Joey. Mrs. Peterson said you'd left some time ago." "I visited the new lending library at the schoolhouse," she explained, showing him her borrowed book. Mr. Fitzgerald told me about it. Jacob Ellis's expression turned speculative. Did he now? Ran into him, did you? Yes, at the general store. Pa, I hope you don't mind, but I invited him to Sunday dinner tomorrow. Her father's weathered face broke into a pleased smile. Mind? Of course not. Cole Fitzgerald is always welcome at our table. He studied her flushed cheeks with growing interest. He's a good man, Joey. One of the best in these parts for all his reserved ways. He's been very kind, she said carefully, not wanting to reveal the flutter of excitement she felt at the prospect of seeing him again so soon. Was all her father said, but his eyes twinkled knowingly. Let's find your sister and head home. We'll need to prepare if we're having company tomorrow. Catherine was predictably excited about the dinner invitation, though for different reasons than Josephine. This is perfect, she declared as they rode home. Mr. Hargrove is returning to Denver next week, and I was running out of opportunities to see him. Now I can invite him to dinner as well. Josephine's heart sank. Kath, I don't think it makes perfect sense, Catherine continued, oblivious to her sister's dismay. Mr. Fitzgerald clearly needs to socialize more, and Mr. Hargrove is such good company. They can discuss business while we serve dessert. Jacob Ellis frowned slightly. Now, Catherine, your sister invited Cole as our guest. It might not be appropriate to spring additional company on him without warning. Nonsense, Pa. Men like Cole Fitzgerald need to expand their acquaintances. He'll thank us later. Catherine's tone brooked no argument, her plans already formed. Besides, Joey won't mind, will you, Joey? Put on the spot, Josephine could only shake her head mutely. She had imagined a quiet dinner where she might actually converse with Cole, perhaps discuss the book he'd given her. With Catherine's vivacious personality and Mr. Hargrove's polished charm dominating the table, she would fade into the background as usual. Her father shot her a sympathetic glance, but said nothing more. Catherine spent the remainder of the journey describing Mr. Hargrove's many fine qualities and speculating about his financial prospects with the railroad company. That evening, as Josephine prepared for bed, she found herself gazing at the copy of Tom Sawyer Cole had given her. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters on the cover, remembering the thoughtful way he'd noticed the gap in her collection. No one had ever paid such careful attention to her preferences before. "What are you smiling about?" Catherine asked, entering their bedroom in her nightgown. Josephine quickly set the book aside. "Nothing in particular." Catherine's eyes fell on the novel. "Is that new? I don't remember seeing it before." "Mr. Fitzgerald gave it to me," Josephine admitted. "He noticed I'd borrowed it last month and thought I might like my own copy." Catherine stared at her in astonishment. "Cole Fitzgerald bought you a book when, today in town, we ran into each other at the general store." "How odd," Catherine mused, sitting on her bed. "I wouldn't have thought him the gift-giving type." "It was just a small kindness," Josephine said, not wanting her sister to make too much of it. Catherine studied her face carefully. "Joey, you don't actually fancy him, do you?" Josephine felt her cheeks warm. "I hardly know him." "That's not a denial." Catherine's expression grew serious. "Joey, I'm saying this as your sister who loves you. Men like Cole Fitzgerald don't marry plain, bookish girls from horse ranches. They marry heiresses from Denver or sophisticated ladies from back east." The words hurt more than Josephine wanted to admit. "He's not like that. He's kind and thoughtful and, of course, he's kind. Most decent men are kind to women they consider safely unmarriageable. It doesn't mean anything beyond basic courtesy." Catherine's tone was gentle but firm. "I don't want to see you hurt, Joey, that's all." Josephine turned away, blinking back sudden tears. "I'm not a fool, Catherine. I know my limitations better than anyone." "Oh, Joey." Catherine moved to sit beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "I didn't mean to upset you, it's just... You've never shown interest in any man before, and I worry that you might misinterpret simple friendliness." "I'm not misinterpreting anything," Josephine said stiffly. "Mr. Fitzgerald has been polite and considerate, nothing more. Now, if you don't mind, I'm tired." Catherine sighed but returned to her own bed. "Mr. Hargrove said he'll definitely come tomorrow. Won't that be nice? He's bringing a friend from the railroad company to a Mr. James. Very handsome, apparently." Josephine didn't respond, turning to face the wall. 3 guests now, not 1. Her quiet dinner with Cole was transforming into a social event centered around Catherine, as most things inevitably did. The next morning brought clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect June weather for a Sunday dinner. Josephine rose early to begin preparations, determined that at least the meal would be special, even if the company wasn't what she'd originally envisioned. She selected their best tablecloth, polished the good silver that had been their mother's, and planned an elaborate menu of roast chicken, fresh vegetables from her garden, and a berry cobbler for dessert. Catherine swept into the kitchen mid-morning, having spent an extra hour on her appearance. Her blue dress matched her eyes perfectly, and she'd arranged her golden curls in an elegant style that made her look like a fashion plate from an Eastern magazine. "You're still in your work dress, Joey," she observed with concern. "You should start getting ready." "Mr. Fitzgerald will be here in less than an hour." "I need to finish the meal first," Josephine replied practically. "There's plenty of time to change." Catherine shook her head. "Let me help, then you can freshen up. First impressions are important." "This will be the 3rd time he's seen me, Kath. I think first impressions are well established." "Still," Catherine insisted, taking the wooden spoon from her hand. "Go on. Wear that green dress Pa got you for Christmas. It brings out the gold flecks in your eyes." Surprised by her sister's sincere desire to help, Josephine relented. Perhaps Catherine was trying to make amends for her blunt words the previous night. "All right, the cobbler needs to come out in 20 minutes. In her room, Josephine washed and changed into the forest green dress Catherine had suggested. It was her nicest garment, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She brushed her brown hair until it shone, arranging it in a simple but flattering style at the nape of her neck. A touch of rose water, a small cameo brooch that had been her mother's, and she was ready. Looking in the small mirror, she assessed herself honestly. Not beautiful like Catherine, certainly, but not entirely without charm either. Her eyes were her best feature, large and expressive, with those gold flecks Catherine had mentioned. Her features were regular, if unremarkable, and the green dress did complement her fair skin nicely. "Miss Ellis cleans up well," she murmured to herself with a small smile, echoing something she'd overheard at a town social the previous year. The sound of approaching horses drew her to the window. Cole had arrived, riding his big bay gelding. He wore a clean white shirt under a dark vest, with no jacket in deference to the warm weather. Even from a distance, he cut an impressive figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a natural authority in his bearing. Josephine took a deep breath to calm her suddenly racing heart and went downstairs to greet him. Her father had already welcomed Cole into the parlor by the time she descended. The 2 men were discussing the recent rainfall and its effect on the hay fields when she entered. Cole immediately stood, his gray eyes taking in her appearance with evident appreciation. "Josephine," he said simply, "you look lovely." The compliment, delivered with such straightforward sincerity, brought color to her cheeks. "Thank you, I'm glad you could join us today." "The pleasure is mine." He produced a small package from his vest pocket, a token of appreciation for your hospitality. Josephine unwrapped it to find a small, exquisitely crafted silver bookmark embossed with a horse motif. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Thank you." "I thought it might be useful for your new books," he explained. Her father watched this exchange with obvious interest. "Mighty thoughtful of you, Cole. Joey treasures her books more than anything." Catherine appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Fitzgerald." "How wonderful to see you again." She removed the apron quickly, revealing her beautiful dress in all its glory. "I was just helping Joey with dinner preparations." Cole greeted her politely. "Miss Catherine, you're looking well." "Thank you, I'm so looking forward to our dinner party." "Mr. Hargrove and his colleague should be arriving shortly." Cole's expression flickered with surprise. He glanced at Josephine, who couldn't quite meet his eyes. "I wasn't aware there would be additional guests." "Oh yes," Catherine continued cheerfully. "Mr. Hargrove is with the railroad company, such interesting work they're doing in the territory. And Mr. James is a civil engineer. I thought you might enjoy discussing business opportunities with them." Jacob Ellis cleared his throat. Catherine thought to expand our little gathering. I hope you don't mind, Cole. Not at all, Cole replied evenly, though Josephine detected a note of disappointment in his voice. The more the merrier. Within minutes, the sound of another carriage announced the arrival of the remaining guests. Mr. Hargrove proved to be a polished gentleman in his 30s, with fashionable side whiskers and an easy charm. His companion, Mr. James, was younger and more reserved, but equally well-dressed. Both men greeted Catherine with marked enthusiasm and Josephine with polite acknowledgement. Miss Ellis, your sister has told me so much about your excellent cooking, Mr. Hargrove said to Josephine. I've been looking forward to experiencing it firsthand. You're very kind, Mr. Hargrove, she replied automatically, while noting that Cole had moved to stand slightly apart from the group, his expression inscrutable. The dynamics of the gathering shifted immediately with the new arrivals. Catherine became the center of attention, her laughter and vivacious conversation drawing everyone into her orbit. Mr. Hargrove was clearly smitten, hanging on her every word, while Mr. James seemed content to admire her from a slight distance. Jacob Ellis, pleased to see his favorite daughter so admired, participated happily in the conversation. Only Cole remained somewhat outside the circle, though he responded courteously when addressed. Josephine, busy with final dinner preparations, found few opportunities to speak with him directly. By the time they all sat down to eat, she felt a distinct sense of disappointment. This was not at all the intimate gathering she had envisioned. At the table, Catherine naturally placed herself between Mr. Hargrove and Mr. James, while Josephine ended up across from Cole, with her father at the head. As she served the meal she had so carefully prepared, Josephine tried to catch Cole's eye, hoping to convey her apology for the unexpected change in plans. But he seemed absorbed in responding to Mr. Hargrove's questions about cattle prices. Mr. Fitzgerald runs the largest ranch in the county, Catherine was explaining to the railroad men. The Flying F is quite famous in these parts. Impressive, Mr. Hargrove nodded. The railroad will be a boon to operations like yours, sir. Shipping cattle east will become much more efficient, assuming the line runs near enough to be useful, Cole replied. I understand the current survey favors a route 20 miles north, Mr. Hargrove smiled enigmatically. Routes can change, Mr. Fitzgerald. Influential landowners often have a say in such matters. The conversation continued along business lines, with occasional forays into Denver society when Catherine skillfully steered it that way. Josephine said little, serving the food and refilling glasses when necessary. It was a familiar role, the practical sister ensuring everyone's comfort while the beautiful sister entertained. Only once did Cole directly address her across the table. The chicken is excellent, Josephine. You have a real talent. The simple compliment, delivered in the midst of more sophisticated conversation, touched her deeply. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Catherine quickly reclaimed his attention. Mr. Fitzgerald, you must tell Mr. Hargrove about your encounters with the Ute tribe last winter. Such a fascinating story, Cole obliged, though Josephine noticed his gaze occasionally returning to her throughout the meal. There was something in those gray eyes that made her wonder if he was as disappointed by the crowded table as she was. After dinner, the men moved to the porch for cigars while Catherine enlisted Josephine's help clearing the table. In the kitchen, Catherine was practically glowing with excitement. Isn't Mr. Hargrove wonderful? She whispered. He's asked Pa if he might call on me next time he's in the territory. He seems very nice, Josephine agreed, scraping plates. And did you see how Mr. James looked at me? If things don't work out with Mr. Hargrove, he would be an excellent second choice. Catherine sighed happily. I do believe I was born to live in a city, Joey. Can you imagine me in Denver? Or even San Francisco? You would certainly thrive there, Josephine said truthfully. Her sister's beauty and charm were wasted in their remote corner of Colorado. Catherine paused in her work, studying Josephine's face. You're disappointed, aren't you, about Mr. Fitzgerald being outnumbered? Josephine shrugged. It doesn't matter, he's being perfectly polite. He keeps looking at you, Catherine said thoughtfully. I noticed during dinner. Even when Mr. Hargrove was telling that amusing story about the governor's ball, Mr. Fitzgerald was watching you serve dessert. "You're imagining things," Josephine replied, though her heart quickened at the observation. "I don't think I am." Catherine's expression turned serious. "Joey, do you truly like him, not just as a friend who shares your interest in books?" Josephine hesitated, then nodded. "I do. He's different. He sees me, Kath, not as your plain sister or Pa's practical daughter, but as myself." Catherine was silent for a moment, her beautiful face thoughtful. "Then I've been terribly selfish, haven't I, inviting all these people when you wanted time with him?" "It's fine, truly," Josephine assured her. "Mr. Hargrove is clearly taken with you. That's worth something." "It is," Catherine agreed with a small smile, "but so is your happiness." She untied her apron decisively. "Take the coffee tray out to the porch. I'll finish up here. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Go on now." Touched by her sister's unexpected support, Josephine arranged the coffee cups on a tray and headed for the porch. The men were engaged in what appeared to be a friendly debate about horse breeding versus cattle ranching for profit, with her father and Cole on one side and the railroad men on the other. "Ah, coffee," Mr. Hargrove exclaimed when she appeared. "Miss Ellis, you are the perfect hostess." "Where's your lovely sister?" Mr. James inquired, looking past Josephine toward the door. "She's finishing up in the kitchen," Josephine replied, serving coffee to each man in turn. When she reached Cole, their fingers brushed briefly as he accepted the cup. The small contact sent a surprising warmth through her. "Thank you," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Before she could respond, the conversation resumed, with Mr. Hargrove dominating as usual. Josephine took a seat in the corner of the porch, content to listen as the men discussed the territory's future. Cole spoke thoughtfully about sustainable ranching practices and the importance of water rights, his knowledge clearly impressing even the sophisticated railroad men. As the afternoon waned, Mr. Hargrove checked his pocket watch. "We should be heading back to town, James. We have that meeting with the mayor at 5. The announcement prompted general movement. Jacob Ellis invited the gentleman to return any time, while Mr. Hargrove made a point of telling Catherine, who had finally joined them, that he would call on her before leaving for Denver. Amidst the flurry of goodbyes, Cole approached Josephine where she stood slightly apart from the group. "I should be going as well," he said. "Thank you for including me in your gathering." "Thank you for coming," she replied, "and for the bookmark, it's beautiful." He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I enjoyed seeing you again, Josephine. Perhaps next time we might have a chance for more conversation." Her heart leapt at the implication of next time. "I'd like that very much." "Good." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Until then." She watched from the porch as he mounted his horse and rode away, his straight-backed figure gradually disappearing down the long drive. Only when he was out of sight did she realize her father was standing beside her, a knowing smile on his weathered face. "Fine man, Cole Fitzgerald," he remarked casually. "Always thought so." Josephine smiled. "Yes, Pa, he is." The following weeks brought changes to the Ellis Ranch. Catherine received regular correspondence from Mr. Hargrove in Denver, and it became increasingly clear that his intentions were serious. Jacob Ellis began discussing the possibility of a trip to the city, perhaps even an extended stay for Catherine if things progressed as expected. Josephine continued her usual routines, tending her garden, helping with the horses, maintaining the household, but her thoughts often strayed to Cole Fitzgerald. He had not returned to the ranch since the Sunday dinner, though her father had seen him in town on business and reported that he'd asked after both Ellis daughters. July brought scorching heat and the annual Founders' Day celebration in Silver Creek. The entire county gathered for the event, which featured races, games, food, and dancing on the town green. The Ellis family planned to attend, as they did every year, with Catherine particularly excited about the opportunity to wear her new dress from Denver. "Do you think Mr. Fitzgerald will be there?" she asked Josephine as they prepared for the journey to town. "He never comes to social events, but perhaps he'll make an exception this time." Josephine folded a shawl into her bag, trying to appear unconcerned. I have no idea. Why would I know his plans? Catherine smiled knowingly. Because he gave you a book and a bookmark and looked at you during dinner like you were the only person in the room. You're exaggerating, Josephine protested, though she couldn't help the small flutter of hope in her chest. The town was transformed when they arrived, bunting and flags decorating Main Street, and tables laden with food set up in the shade of large oak trees. Children ran laughing between booths where games of skill and chance were being conducted, while musicians tuned their instruments on a small platform erected for dancing later in the evening. Jacob Ellis was immediately drawn into conversation with fellow ranchers, while Catherine was quickly surrounded by admirers who had been anticipating her arrival. Josephine found herself at liberty to wander the festivities alone, a situation that would have once made her uncomfortable, but now felt strangely freeing. She browsed the handicraft displays, admiring quilts and woodwork created by local artisans, and purchased a small bag of candied almonds from Mrs. Peterson's booth. The day was warm but not oppressive, with a gentle breeze carrying the scents of barbecue and fresh baked pies across the green. Miss Ellis. The deep voice behind her made her turn quickly, a smile already forming. Cole Fitzgerald stood there in his best shirt and vest, his dark hair neatly combed beneath his hat. He looked different somehow, less the hard-working rancher and more the successful businessman, though his eyes were the same stormy gray that had featured in her thoughts these past weeks. "Mr. Fitzgerald," she replied, pleasure evident in her voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I don't usually attend," he admitted, "but I had reason to make an exception this year." The implication sent warmth spreading through her chest. "The weather is certainly perfect for a celebration." "It is," he gestured to the bag in her hand. "Mrs. Peterson's almonds." "They're my favorite as well." Josephine offered him the bag. "Would you like some?" He accepted a few nuts, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Thank you. Would you care to walk? The flower displays are particularly fine this year." They strolled together through the festival, attracting curious glances from townspeople unused to seeing the reserved owner of the Flying F in such companionable conversation with a young woman. Josephine was acutely aware of these looks, but found she didn't mind them. There was something affirming about being seen alongside a man of Cole's stature and character. "I finished Tom Sawyer," she told him as they paused to admire a display of wildflowers arranged by the schoolchildren. "I enjoyed it even more the second time. I'm glad." Twain has a way of capturing human nature that feels honest. He hesitated, then added, "I took the liberty of ordering another book for you from Denver. It should arrive next week." Josephine looked up at him in surprise. "That's very kind, but unnecessary." "The lending library has been a wonderful resource." "This one isn't available at the library. It's a new collection of poetry by Walt Whitman. I thought you might appreciate his perspective on America." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. "Thank you. I look forward to reading it." They continued walking, their conversation flowing easily from books to horses to the changing landscape of the territory. Cole spoke of his plans for the Flying F, his hopes of introducing new breeding stock from Kentucky, his concerns about water rights as more settlers arrived. Josephine found herself sharing her own thoughts and observations about ranch life, encouraged by his attentive interest. "You understand the land in a way many born here don't," he commented. "Your father must value your insights." Josephine smiled ruefully. "Pa respects my practical knowledge, but he doesn't often seek my opinions on larger matters. That's not a daughter's role in his view." "A shame," Cole replied seriously. "You have a clear way of thinking that would benefit any operation." The compliment, so specific to her mind rather than her appearance or domestic skills, made her glow with pleasure. "Thank you, that means a great deal." As they completed their circuit of the festival grounds, Cole cleared his throat. "Josephine, I wonder if I might call on you properly sometime." "At your father's convenience, of course." Her heart seemed to skip a beat. "Call on me, if that would be agreeable to you." His expression was earnest, with none of the practiced charm Mr. Hargrove had displayed toward Catherine. "I've enjoyed our conversations greatly and would like the opportunity for more." "Yes," she said simply, unable to hide her smile, "that would be very agreeable." His answering smile transformed his serious face, revealing a dimple in one cheek she'd never noticed before. "Good. I'll speak with your father today." The sound of music starting up drew their attention to the town green, where couples were beginning to gather for dancing. Josephine saw Catherine in the center, her blue dress making her stand out among the more practically attired frontier women. Several men were vying for her attention, though she seemed to be scanning the crowd as if looking for someone. "Would you care to dance?" Cole asked, offering his arm. Josephine hesitated. She enjoyed dancing well enough, but was accustomed to being a wallflower at such events while Catherine collected partners. The thought of being on display with Cole, subject to the town's curious scrutiny, was somewhat daunting. He sensed her hesitation. "We don't have to if you'd prefer not to." "It's not that," she assured him. "I'm just not used to attention." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ah, well, we could wait for a less lively number when the crowd is larger if you'd be more comfortable then." His consideration touched her. "Actually, I think I'd like to dance now, if you would." "Very much," he replied, offering his arm again. As they joined the dancers on the green, Josephine caught sight of Catherine watching them with wide eyes. Her sister's surprise quickly transformed into a delighted smile and an encouraging nod that made Josephine's confidence grow. Cole proved to be an excellent dancer, his movements sure and graceful despite his size. He guided her through the steps of the reel with gentle pressure on her waist and hand, his eyes never leaving her face. For once, Josephine didn't feel self-conscious or overshadowed. In Cole's arms, with his full attention focused on her, she felt significant. The dance ended too soon, but before they could decide whether to continue for another, Jacob Ellis approached, his expression a mixture of surprise and pleasure. "Cole, didn't expect to see you on the dance floor," he said, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. "My Joey got you out here, did she?" "She did, sir," Cole replied respectfully. "In fact, I was hoping to have a word with you about calling on your daughter with your permission." Jacob's eyebrows shot up, but his smile widened. "Is that so? Well, well. Let's step over here and discuss it, shall we?" He winked at Josephine. "Don't worry, Joey, I won't scare him off." As the men moved a short distance away for their conversation, Catherine appeared at Josephine's side, her eyes bright with excitement. "Joey, you've been keeping secrets," she accused playfully. "Cole Fitzgerald asked you to dance, and now he's speaking with Pa." Josephine couldn't suppress her smile. "He wants to call on me properly," Catherine squealed and hugged her tightly. "Oh, Joey, that's wonderful. I told you he was interested." "You told me quite the opposite, as I recall," Josephine reminded her, though without rancor. Catherine waved this away. "I was wrong, clearly, and I've never been happier to be wrong." She studied her sister's face. "You're glowing, Joey. It suits you." Before Josephine could respond, their father and Cole returned. Jacob Ellis was beaming, while Cole looked quietly satisfied. "Well, girls, it seems we'll be having a regular visitor at the ranch," Jacob announced. "Cole here has my permission to call on Joey whenever his schedule permits." Catherine clapped her hands in delight. "Wonderful. Perhaps you could join us for supper this Friday, Mr. Fitzgerald. Joey makes the most delicious apple dumplings on Fridays." "I'd be honored," Cole replied, his eyes meeting Josephine's with warmth that made her cheeks flush. "If that's convenient for the family." "Of course it is," Jacob assured him. "Now I believe they're calling for partners for the next dance. Catherine, I see young Dr. Miller looking for you. Joey, I expect Cole here would like another turn around the floor." As her father led Catherine away, Josephine found herself alone with Cole once more. He offered his hand. "Shall we?" "Yes," she said simply, placing her hand in his. As they joined the line of dancers, Josephine caught whispers and curious glances from the townspeople. The plain Ellis girl dancing twice with Cole Fitzgerald was apparently worthy of comment. For once, she found she didn't mind being the subject of gossip. Let them talk. For the first time in her life, she was being chosen first, and the feeling was indescribable. The weeks that followed were like something from a dream. Cole called at the Ellis Ranch every Friday evening and often on Sundays after church as well. He brought books for Josephine, not just the promised Whitman collection, but volumes of history, natural science, and literature that he thought might interest her. They spent hours discussing these readings, sometimes walking along the creek that bordered the Ellis property, sometimes sitting on the porch while her father dozed in his chair nearby. Catherine, preparing for her own courtship with Mr. Hargrove, who wrote weekly from Denver, watched her sister's blossoming relationship with amused delight. "You've tamed the most eligible bachelor in the county," she teased one evening as they prepared for bed. "Half the unmarried women in Silver Creek are green with envy." Josephine brushed her hair, smiling at her reflection. "He's not tamed. He's exactly who he's always been, just willing to share more of himself now." "He's different with you," Catherine observed. "Everyone says so." "Mrs. Peterson told me he actually smiled at her last week when buying supplies. Smiled. The man's reputation for sternness is utterly ruined. Perhaps he was always capable of smiling. People just didn't give him reason to." Catherine studied her sister thoughtfully. "You love him, don't you?" Josephine's hands stilled on her brush. Yes, I believe I do. And does he love you? He hasn't said so, but I hope." Catherine moved to sit beside her, taking the brush to continue the strokes through Josephine's brown hair. "He does. Anyone with eyes can see it. The way he looks at you when you're reading aloud or serving dinner or just sitting quietly, it's as if he can't quite believe his good fortune." "Now you're being fanciful," Josephine protested, though her heart leapt at the description. "I'm being observant," Catherine corrected. "I know what admiration looks like, Joey. I've seen it often enough, but this is different. This is deeper." She set the brush down and squeezed her sister's shoulders. "I'm happy for you, truly." Josephine covered her sister's hand with her own. "Thank you, Kath. That means more than you know." August brought scorching heat and the annual county fair, where Jacob Ellis would be showing his prized horses. The entire family attended, including Cole, who had become such a regular visitor that townsfolk now referred to him as Ellis's future son-in-law. Though no formal engagement had been announced, the fairgrounds bustled with activity, livestock judging, produced competitions, races, and games. Jacob's horses were entered in several categories, and he proudly led them through their paces for the judges while Josephine and Catherine watched from the sidelines. "Your father has a gift with horses," Cole remarked, standing beside Josephine. "Few men understand them as he does." "He says the same about you," she replied. "He told me your suggestions improved his breeding program considerably." Cole smiled, a gesture that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "High praise indeed. Speaking of horses, there's something I'd like to show you." "Would you come with me for a moment?" Curious, Josephine followed him away from the main exhibition area toward a quieter section of the fairgrounds where private sales were conducted. In one of the temporary corrals stood a beautiful Palomino mare, her coat gleaming like gold in the sunlight. "What do you think of her?" Cole asked as they approached the fence. Josephine studied the horse with a practiced eye. "She's lovely, perfect conformation, good strong legs, Tennessee walking horse breeding, if I'm not mistaken." "You're not. Your father trained you well." Cole whistled softly and the mare trotted over to the fence, nuzzling his outstretched hand. "Her name is Sunflower. She's 5 years old, fully trained and exceptionally gentle." "She's magnificent," Josephine said, reaching out to stroke the mare's velvety nose. "Are you considering her for your breeding program?" "No," Cole replied, watching her face carefully. "I'm considering her for you." Josephine's hand stilled on the horse's nose. "For me. I've noticed you always ride the same brown, gelding, a solid animal but not particularly suited to a lady. Sunflower here would carry you more comfortably, and she's spirited enough to be interesting without being dangerous." Overwhelmed, Josephine stared at the beautiful horse. "Cole, I couldn't possibly accept such a gift. She must be worth a small fortune." "Your father has already approved the purchase," he said quietly. "But only if you want her, Josephine. I would never presume to decide such a thing for you." She turned to him, tears pricking at her eyes. "Why would you do this?" Because I love you, he said simply, the words falling between them like stones in still water. Because I've watched you care for everyone else without asking anything for yourself. Because you deserve beautiful things that bring you joy. Josephine's breath caught in her throat. You love me. I do, more than I thought possible. His gray eyes were intense, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. I've been trying to find the right moment to tell you to ask me what, she whispered, her heart pounding. Instead of answering immediately, Cole reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Josephine's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a ring, a single perfect diamond set in gold, elegant but not ostentatious. Josephine Ellis, he said, his deep voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I love you for your kind heart, your thoughtful mind, and your quiet strength. You've brought light into my life that I didn't know was missing. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? For a moment, Josephine couldn't speak. This man, this good, honorable man whom any woman would be proud to marry, was looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, not Catherine, her plain, practical Josephine. Yes, she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Cole, I would be honored to be your wife. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the sunlight just as Sunflower's coat did beside them. You've made me the happiest man in Colorado territory, he said, lifting her hand to his lips. I love you, she told him, the words feeling both momentous and perfectly natural. I have for some time now. He drew her closer, mindful of their public location but unable to resist pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I should return you to your family before they come looking for us. Your father wants to make the announcement after the judging concludes. Catherine will be beside herself with excitement, Josephine laughed, glancing at the ring on her finger with wonder. She's been predicting this for weeks. Your sister is more perceptive than I initially gave her credit for, Cole admitted. She took me aside last Sunday to inform me that if I didn't make my intentions clear soon, she would be forced to intervene for your sake. She didn't, Josephine gasped, mortified. She did. But she also told me that I'd be gaining the best wife in the territory, which I already knew. He offered his arm. Shall we? As they walked back toward the main fairgrounds, Josephine felt as if she were floating. The weight of the ring on her finger was unfamiliar but perfect, a tangible symbol of a love she had never expected to find. Catherine spotted them first, her eyes immediately dropping to Josephine's hand. Her delighted squeal drew the attention of everyone nearby, including their father, who turned from his conversation with the horse judges to beam at them. Joey, let me see. Catherine rushed forward, grabbing her sister's hand to examine the ring. It's beautiful. Perfect for you, elegant without being showy. She looked up at Cole with approval. Well done, Mr. Fitzgerald. I knew you had good taste. Jacob Ellis approached more sedately, though his smile was just as wide. I see, she said yes, as we knew she would. Congratulations, you two. He clapped Cole on the shoulder before embracing Josephine. Your mother would be so proud, Joey, so proud. The mention of her mother brought tears to Josephine's eyes. Thank you, Pa, word spread quickly through the fairgrounds. By the time the horse judging concluded, with Jacob's stallion winning first prize, most of the county knew that Cole Fitzgerald of the Flying F had proposed to Josephine Ellis, the plain Ellis sister, as some still whispered in surprise. Mrs. Peterson hugged Josephine warmly. I always said you were the smart one, dear. Caught yourself the best man in the county while the other girls were busy preening. Mrs. Whittaker from the school pressed a book of household management into her hands. For the mistress of the Flying F, that big house needs a woman's touch. Even Sheriff Dawson offered his congratulations, telling Cole he'd made a wise choice. That girl's got sense. Unlike half the females in this county, you'll never have to worry about her running off with a smooth-talking drummer or gambling away the ranch silver. Through it all, Cole remained at Josephine's side, his hand often finding hers, his gray eyes seeking her face as if to reassure himself of her happiness. The attention was overwhelming for someone accustomed to standing in her sister's shadow, but his steady presence anchored her. Late in the afternoon, as the fair activities were winding down, Cole led her away from the crowds to a quiet spot beneath an old cottonwood tree. "Are you happy?" he asked simply. "More than I can express," she assured him, her fingers laced with his. "But I still can't quite believe it." "Of all the women you could have chosen, there was never a choice," he interrupted gently. "From the moment I saw you in town that day, standing apart from the chaos, observing everything with those thoughtful eyes, I knew you were different, special." "I thought you barely noticed me," she admitted. "Most men don't with Catherine nearby." Cole's expression turned serious. "Your sister is beautiful, certainly, but beauty without substance holds little appeal for me, Josephine. I've known too many lovely faces hiding empty minds or cold hearts." "Catherine isn't like that," Josephine felt compelled to defend. "She's kind, truly. I know, I've come to respect her greatly these past weeks, but she's not you." His hand cupped her cheek tenderly. "You see the world clearly without pretense. You love deeply but sensibly. You find joy in simple things: a good book, a well-prepared meal, a sunrise over the mountains. These are the qualities that matter for a lifetime together." Josephine leaned into his touch, overwhelmed by the depth of his understanding. "I never thought anyone would see me the way you do." "Then others have been blind," he said simply. "But I'm grateful for their oversight. It means I found you first." When they rejoined the Ellis family to return home, Catherine pulled Josephine aside while Cole helped their father load the wagon. "I want you to have something," she said, pressing a small package into Josephine's hands. "Open it later when you're alone." That night, after the excitement had finally died down and Catherine was asleep in their shared bedroom, Josephine remembered the package. Unwrapping it by lamplight, she found a beautiful ivory hair comb that had belonged to their mother, the one Catherine had always claimed would be hers when she married. A small note accompanied it. "For your wedding day. Mama would have wanted you to have this. You'll be the most beautiful bride Colorado has ever seen because you'll be the happiest. All my love, Catherine." Tears filled Josephine's eyes as she clutched the precious heirloom. Her sister, for all her vanity and self-absorption, had a generous heart when it mattered most. The wedding was set for October, when the aspen trees would turn gold in the mountains, and the worst heat of summer would have passed. Cole suggested a simple ceremony at the Ellis Ranch, followed by a celebration for friends and neighbors, an idea Josephine heartily endorsed. Neither of them wanted an elaborate affair in town. "The Flying F will be ready for you," Cole told her during one of their evening walks. "I've ordered new curtains and rugs from Denver, and Mrs. Holloway is beside herself with excitement about having a mistress in the house at last." "I'm nervous about that part," Josephine admitted. "Taking over someone else's household. Mrs. Holloway has been running your home for years. She's looking forward to having less responsibility, not more," Cole assured her. "The house is too large for one housekeeper to manage properly. She's already talking about training a girl from town to help with the laundry and cleaning." "And the men, will they respect me as their employer's wife?" Cole squeezed her hand. "They already respect you as Jacob Ellis's daughter and a knowledgeable horsewoman. But yes, they'll respect you as Mrs. Fitzgerald too, or they'll answer to me." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. Catherine helped Josephine sew her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jacob Ellis ordered a new bedroom set for his daughter's future home, while Cole expanded the library at the Flying F to accommodate Josephine's growing book collection. Mr. Hargrove proposed to Catherine during this time, offering her a life in Denver as the wife of a rising railroad executive. She accepted joyfully, though she insisted their wedding would wait until spring, after Josephine was settled in her new home. "I won't steal your moment, Joey," she declared when Josephine protested that there was no need to wait. "This is your time to shine. Besides, I need months to plan the wedding I want. You'll help me, won't you?" "Of course," Josephine promised, touched by her sister's consideration. As October approached, the territory was blessed with perfect weather, warm days and cool nights, with the aspens turning exactly as hoped. The day before the wedding, Cole arrived at the Ellis Ranch with Sunflower in tow, officially presenting the mare to his bride-to-be. She'll live in the stable at the Flying F, he explained as Josephine stroked the beautiful horse's neck. But I thought you might like to have her here tonight. She's magnificent, Josephine said again, still overwhelmed by the generous gift. Thank you, Cole, for everything. His eyes softened as he looked at her. I should be thanking you, Josephine Ellis. For seeing something worthwhile in a solitary rancher everyone else thought too serious and dull for good company. You could never be dull, she told him honestly. Not to me. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the approaching winter. The Ellis Ranch had been transformed, flowers and ribbons adorning the porch and yard, tables set up beneath a canopy of golden leaves, lanterns ready to be lit as evening approached. In her bedroom, Josephine sat before the small mirror as Catherine arranged her hair, weaving flowers among the brown strands and finally securing their mother's ivory comb at the crown. There, Catherine said with satisfaction. Perfect. Josephine hardly recognized the woman in the mirror, not because she suddenly looked different, but because she had never seen herself look so radiant. Her brown eyes shone with happiness, her cheeks flushed with natural color, her smile impossible to suppress. You're beautiful, Joey, Catherine said softly, meeting her sister's eyes in the reflection. Not because of anything I've done with your hair or the dress we've made. You're beautiful because you're loved exactly as you are. Tears threatened, but Josephine blinked them back. Thank you, Kath. For everything, sisters, Catherine said simply, squeezing her shoulders. Now, let's not keep that man waiting. I think he's been ready to marry you since the moment he met you. Downstairs, their father waited, dressed in his best suit, his eyes suspiciously bright when he saw Josephine descend. My girl, he said, his voice rough with emotion, you look just like your mother on our wedding day. It was the highest compliment he could give, and Josephine embraced him tightly. Thank you, Pa. Outside, guests had gathered in the yard where Reverend Thomas waited beneath an arch of autumn branches. Cole stood beside him, tall and straight in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his gray eyes fixed on the house entrance with barely contained anticipation. When Josephine appeared on her father's arm, a collective murmur went through the assembled guests. She heard Mrs. Peterson whisper to her husband, "Would you look at that? I never realized how lovely she is," and felt a small surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with vanity and everything to do with finally being seen. But it was Cole's face that captured her complete attention. As she walked toward him, his expression transformed from nervous anticipation to pure joy, his eyes never leaving hers, his smile so warm it seemed to radiate through her entire being. When Jacob Ellis placed her hand in Cole's, she felt the slight tremor in his fingers and realized this strong, capable man was just as moved by the moment as she was. The knowledge only deepened her love for him. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple vows in plain gold bands, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Cole's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, drawing approving chuckles from the guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. There was food and music, dancing and laughter, congratulations from neighbors and friends who had watched Josephine grow from a quiet child into the woman now becoming mistress of the largest ranch in the county. Through it all, Cole remained at her side, his hand often finding hers, his eyes frequently seeking her face as if to reassure himself of her happiness. They danced together beneath the stars, her ivory dress gleaming in the lamplight, his strong arms guiding her with the same gentle confidence he showed in everything. Happy, Mrs. Fitzgerald? He asked as they took a moment apart from the crowd, standing at the edge of the yard where they could see the distant mountains silhouetted against the night sky. Perfectly, she assured him, leaning her head against his shoulder. And you, more than I ever thought possible. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I have everything I need right here. As the hour grew late, they bid farewell to their guests and prepared to depart for their new home. Jacob Ellis embraced his daughter with tears in his eyes, whispering how proud he was and how much he would miss her, Though the Flying F was only an hour's ride away, Catherine hugged her fiercely. "Be happy, Joey. You deserve every bit of joy." "So do you," Josephine replied, holding her sister tight. "I'll see you soon to help with your wedding plans." Cole had arranged for a carriage to take them to the Flying F, though it was festooned with ribbons and flowers by well-meaning guests. As they drove away amid cheers and good wishes, Josephine looked back at her childhood home, now aglow with lanterns and warmth. "Having second thoughts?" Cole asked gently. "Not one," she assured him, turning to smile at her husband. "I'm just saying goodbye to one chapter before beginning another." The Flying F was illuminated when they arrived, lanterns lighting the path to the main house. Cole had sent word ahead, and Mrs. Holloway had prepared everything for their arrival. As the carriage stopped before the wide porch, Cole surprised Josephine by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Fitzgerald," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the spacious entry hall. Josephine looked around at what would now be her home, the polished wood floors, the handsome furniture, the sense of solid comfort rather than ostentation. It suited Cole perfectly, and she found it suited her as well. Mrs. Holloway appeared briefly to welcome them, then tactfully withdrew to her quarters in the rear of the house, leaving the newlyweds to explore their domain in privacy. "Would you like to see the library?" Cole asked, knowing what would please her most. "I've been working on it for weeks." He led her to a room off the main parlor, opening the door to reveal walls lined with bookshelves, some already filled with volumes, others waiting for her collection. A comfortable reading chair sat beside the window, with a smaller desk positioned to catch the morning light. "Oh, Cole," she breathed, running her fingers along the polished shelves. "It's perfect. It's yours," he said simply. "Your space whenever you need quiet or solitude." "Our space," she corrected, turning to embrace him. "I don't want separate lives under one roof." His arms tightened around her. "Nor do I, but I want you to know that every part of this house is yours now to change or keep as you wish. You're not a guest here, Josephine. You're its heart." Later, as they prepared for bed in the master suite that had been refreshed with new linens and curtains in anticipation of her arrival, Josephine found herself unexpectedly shy. Cole sensed her nervousness and approached slowly, taking her hands in his. "We have all the time in the world," he said gently. "Nothing needs to happen that you're not ready for." His consideration brought tears to her eyes. "It's not that, I'm just overwhelmed that this is real, that you chose me," understanding dawned in his eyes. "Josephine," he said, cupping her face in his hands, "loving you is the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done. You are exactly what I've been looking for my entire life, though I didn't know it until I saw you." His kiss was tender at first, then deepening as she responded with growing confidence. In the quiet of their bedroom, she discovered that being truly seen by someone who loved her was the greatest gift of all, and that the plain sister in the right eyes could be the most beautiful woman in the world. Epilogue: 5 years later, the June sun beat down on the Flying F ranch as Josephine Fitzgerald sat on the wide front porch, watching her 3-year-old daughter chase butterflies in the yard. Little Mary had her father's gray eyes and her mother's thoughtful expression, combined with a curiosity about the world that kept both parents constantly on their toes. "Mama, look." Mary called, pointing to a particularly vibrant monarch fluttering above the garden Josephine had established in their first year of marriage. "I see it, sweetheart," Josephine called back. "Isn't it beautiful?" The sound of approaching hoofbeats made both mother and daughter turn toward the lane. Cole appeared on his favorite gelding, returning from his morning inspection of the north pastures. At the sight of him, Mary let out a delighted squeal and ran toward the gate, her dark curls bouncing. Papa's home." Cole dismounted in one fluid motion and scooped his daughter into his arms, swinging her high before settling her on his hip. "There's my girl. Have you been helping your mama this morning?" "I caught butterflies," Mary informed him seriously, "and helped with baby Thomas." "Did you indeed?" "That's my good helper." Cole carried her up the path to the porch, where Josephine waited with their sleeping 6-month-old son cradled in her arms. "And how are my wife and son today?" "Perfectly well," Josephine replied, accepting his kiss with a smile. Thomas finally fell asleep after fighting it all morning. "How are the new calves?" "Thriving. This year's herd might be our best yet." He sat beside her, keeping Mary on his lap. "Your sister's letter arrived while I was out. The stagecoach brought the mail early." Josephine's face lit up. "Wonderful. How are they enjoying San Francisco?" "See for yourself," Cole said, producing the envelope from his vest pocket. "Mary, shall we give Mama a moment to read while we check on Sunflower? I think she might have a surprise for us in her stall." "A surprise?" Mary's eyes widened with excitement. "What is it, Papa? We'll have to go see," he said mysteriously, setting her on her feet and taking her hand. "We'll be back soon," he told Josephine with a wink. As father and daughter headed toward the stables, Josephine adjusted the sleeping baby in her arms and opened her sister's letter. Catherine's elegant handwriting filled several pages, describing her life in San Francisco, where her husband now served as a regional director for the railroad company. Their two young sons were thriving in the city, and Catherine had become something of a social leader among the railroad wives. "Your husband's latest shipment of beef cattle arrived safely and caused quite a stir among the local merchants," Catherine wrote. "Everyone is talking about the quality of flying F beef, and Edward says Cole could name his price for the next shipment. I'm so proud to tell everyone that the famous rancher is my brother-in-law. Father visited last month and seemed well, though I think he misses having family at the Ellis Ranch. Perhaps you might consider purchasing it when he's ready to retire. It would be a fine legacy for Thomas and Mary and any other little Fitzgeralds you might produce in the coming years. Speaking of family, I've enclosed a photograph of our boys. James looks more like Edward every day, while little Jacob has my coloring but your thoughtful expression. How strange that my son should resemble my sister more than me. We plan to visit at Christmas if the weather permits travel. I long to see you all and to show off my handsome sons to the good people of Silver Creek, who never thought flighty Catherine Ellis would become a respectable matron. All my love to you, Cole, and my precious niece and nephew, your devoted sister, Catherine Hargrove." Josephine smiled as she refolded the letter. Catherine had found her perfect match in Edward Hargrove, just as Josephine had found hers in Cole. Their paths had diverged, one sister to the bustling city, one to the ranch she loved, but their bond remained as strong as ever. The sound of laughter drew her attention to the yard, where Cole was returning with Mary on his shoulders, his face alight with the joy that had become familiar over their years together. Behind them trotted a small palomino foal, barely steady on its spindly legs. "Look, Mama." Mary called excitedly. "Sunflower has a baby. Papa says it's mine when it's bigger. Is that so?" Josephine raised an eyebrow at her husband, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Every child needs a good horse," he defended himself, lifting Mary down. "And she won't be riding alone for years yet." "Of course not," Josephine agreed, her mock sternness dissolving into a smile. "She'll need her papa right beside her, just as I do." Cole's expression softened as he took a seat beside her, draping his arm along the back of the porch swing behind her shoulders. Mary knelt in the grass, watching the foal with fascination while staying a respectful distance away as her father had taught her. "Are you happy, Josephine?" Cole asked quietly, an echo of the question he had posed on the day of their engagement. She leaned against his solid strength, their sleeping son nestled between them, their daughter's laughter floating on the summer air. "Completely," she told him truthfully. "Are you?" "Beyond measure." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Who would have thought that stopping in town on a cattle sale day would lead to all this?" "Providence," Josephine suggested, thinking of all the small choices and chances that had brought them together. "Or perhaps just good judgment on your part, recognizing quality when others overlooked it." Cole chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her side. "I've always said I have an eye for value others miss. Best decision I ever made, seeing past the obvious to find the true treasure." As the sun began its slow descent toward the western mountains, casting golden light across the ranch they had built together, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the Plain sister, overlooked and undervalued to the cherished wife, respected mistress of the Flying F, and beloved mother, it was a transformation she could never have imagined before Cole Fitzgerald looked at her and truly saw her. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, noting her contemplative expression. "Just how fortunate I am," she replied, shifting the baby in her arms as he began to stir, "and how sometimes the quiet ones get the last word after all." "And the best man," Cole added with a smile, drawing her closer as their children played in the golden light of the life they had created together.